All right, we now welcome on Ray Fittipaldo from the Pittsburgh Post Gazette. Ray, Pittsburgh Steelers started out the season 2-6, finished out the season winning 7 out of their 8 last games. Um, I'm going to ask you just right off the bat, what changed in the second half of the season? Was it the offensive line? Would you say was the biggest change that got their act together in the second half of the season?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a couple of things. I think first and foremost, they had a really difficult schedule early in that first half of the season, and then the schedule did lighten up in the second half. But talking personnel, yes, the offensive line came together. I think an overlooked aspect of that was they were virtually free of injuries the entire season. All five of those guys started every single game, and they got better as the season went on. Najee Harris got better as the season went on. He had a foot injury early in the season that kind of hampered his progress. Kenny Pickett was a turnover machine in the first half of the season once he got the reins to the offense, and then they kind of settled him down and got him to a point where he was being more careful with the ball. And then on top of that, he delivered some big plays in some big moments. I'm thinking, the Raiders game late in the year, the Ravens game late in the year, where they still had a chance to get into the playoffs. So, yeah, I mean, I think all those things we're talking about led to that strong finish. And now they're hoping to carry it over into the 2023 season.
Yeah, virtually eliminated almost, I guess what, by week 12, week 13 there, and then came back to almost winning, almost making the playoffs, if not Miami winning at the last game there in week 18. So yeah, it was an up and down season for Pittsburgh. Starting off the season beating arguably a Super Bowl favorite in the Bengals, and then having a downward middle of the season, and like we just said, a good second half of the season there. Going into the draft though, this offseason, would it be an offensive lineman that the Steelers are going to be looking to bolster?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are probably three positions of need. First and foremost, offensive line is certainly up there, but they're also aging out on the defensive line. And they're like a lot of teams, they need a number one cornerback. So I don't think they have desperate needs at any of those three spots, but if I had to rank their needs going into this draft, I would say O line, D line, and then cornerback in no particular order. I think if they are going to upgrade on the offensive line, they'll probably draft a tackle in the first round. If not, I think you could wait to get a guard or a center, probably with pick 32 or pick 49 in the second round.
Do you think the Steelers address any of their needs in free agency, or do they look to the draft as well?
They're a team that typically likes to re-sign their own free agents, and they caught a couple of big ones that could hit the open market next week. Cam Sutton is due a big raise. He's hitting free agency. He's probably going to make between 10 and 12 million a year. He's their number one cornerback. Larry Ogunjobi, veteran defensive lineman, also is a guy who's due a new contract. I think they'll try to get him done as well. So typically, that's what they do. They're a draft and develop team. They like to sign their own guys, the guys they know pretty well. I would have to say, if they do sign any outside free agents, you're probably looking at two or three positions. I think you could look at receiver. I think they could use a veteran receiver in that room to go with those young guys like George Pickens and Deontay Johnson, and also inside linebacker. Devin Bush is a free agent. Robert Spillane is a free agent. And the only guys under contract for 2023 right now are Miles Jack and Mark Robinson, who's coming off his rookie season. So, yeah, I think they'll dabble in outside free agency, but for the most part, I think they're just going to try to use their cap space to re-sign their own guys.
Yeah, so Pittsburgh this year, fifth worst in the league in average points per game, 17 and a half, and bottom 10 in the league in both total yards per game and passing yards per game. Now we know Kenny Pickett was a rookie quarterback in his first year. But talk about Matt Canada, because I know the national perception of Matt Canada is that people don't really understand how he's still in his position because of his very conservative play calling and kind of very poor third down play calls that he does. So what are the Steeler fans, like the local fans, saying about Matt Canada? Do they mirror the public perception, like the national perception of Matt Canada?
Oh, absolutely. They thought he should have been gone at the end of the season. And I'll tell you, the only reason he's still here, I think, is Mike Tomlin. I think Mike, been the head coach since 2007. He's to the point now where he can make some of those calls without interference from the owner. And Mike Tomlin wanted him back. And I think, he told us after the season that he didn't want to start over again with Kenny Pickett going into year 2 with a new coordinator. So I think this is probably Matt Canada's last chance to get it done. This season here was pretty bad across the board. I know they did show some slight improvement late in the season, but if he doesn't get it this done, get it done this time, then I think Kenny Pickett ultimately will have a new play caller by year 3. But he's Mike Tomlin's guy. Mike Tomlin hired him when he had no coordinating experience in the NFL. He was a guy who was well traveled in the college circuit, but they connected. They got a rapport, and like I said, it's going to be one more year of Matt Canada, and we'll see if it gets any better this year. I think the expectation, guys, is that he's going to take the handcuffs off Kenny Pickett a little bit. That conservative approach will open up a little bit. But again, if you're talking to Steelers fans, they're very, very much, aware of the shortcomings of the offense under Matt Canada.
Well,
Also, what is the local opinion of the Pittsburgh fans on Mike Tomlin?
Well, I think most level-headed fans understood that there was going to be a transition once Ben Roethlisberger retired. And if you look at it, guys, they're happy with Kenny Pickett, and they got him the year after Ben retired. We'll see how he pans out. There are no promises, but this is a team right now that has a lot of young talent on offense to go along with a solid veteran core on defense. So they're not one of these teams that's going to be rebuilding. The expectations are, after what they did last season, is to get back to the playoffs. They got star power on defense with T.J. Watt, Minkah Fitzpatrick, and Cam Hayward. Those guys are expected to carry the defense again. And then you look at their young core with Kenny Pickett, George Pickens, Najee Harris, Deontay Johnson, tight end Pat Freiermuth. The expectation is that they're set up to win now. So, I don't think Mike's going to get any breaks. He doesn't want any breaks. I think he expects to contend year in and year out. And again, I think the expectation for 2023, based on the way they finished 2022, is to get back and to make the playoffs.
Yeah, I thought it was crazy when people were saying this year that he was on the hot seat. I mean, I think he's just way too good of a coach for that, to be completely honest. But let me ask you this. So say Matt Canada does go next year, and it's kind of a two-part question. One, what is a successful season for Steelers next year, given their past year and still Kenny Pickett being on his second year? And if Matt Canada does go, would Mike Tomlin ever consider being the play caller?
No. To answer your second question first, Mike has a defensive background. He has grown on the offensive side of the ball. He is very much involved in that offense. But no, I think he would bring in another play caller, likely a veteran play caller, to take over if that happens. And then getting back to your first part, they finished 9-8, missed the playoffs. Taking into account that the AFC is just brutal, with the Bengals and the Chiefs and the Bills. And, if the Chargers ever figure it out with Justin Herbert, there are quarterbacks galore. There are a lot of good young offenses in this conference. I would say, 10-7, make the playoffs would be a good year. See if you can make some noise in the playoffs. But, being that they still have a young quarterback, a guy who hasn't proven himself on the big stage, I don't think anything more than that would be expected. But again, I will reiterate that the Steelers fans are expecting a return to the playoffs this year. They feel like the second half of last season was, a positive step in the right direction. The Steelers obviously feel that way too, and they think they're well on their way to getting back there in 2023.
So you bring up free agency earlier. Pittsburgh, 18th most amount of cap space this year at 13.1 million. Any specific names that the Steelers are looking at? I know you mentioned who might be leaving and positions particularly that they might be looking into, but any specific names that they might be looking into?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few. I think the Steelers are never afraid to go back to players who have played for them previously. And Bud Dupree just came on the open market. He was cut by the Tennessee Titans in a salary cap move. So, if he would come back for the right price, the Steelers are very much in need of a quality backup outside linebacker. So if Bud is ready to get on with that stage of his career, not be a starter, just be a contributor. I think that's a name to keep an eye on. There's some others. People have talked about David Long, an inside linebacker. I spoke previously about the need for an inside linebacker for the Steelers with Robert Spillane and Devin Bush both becoming free agents. So, those are the types of names I think they would go after. I don't think you're going to see them, spending 18, 20 million on a number one corner or that type of money really at any position. I think really they're just looking to fill some holes on their roster before the draft. And as I mentioned earlier, they're very much a draft and develop team. That's the way they like to build their rosters. And even though they have a first-year GM in Omar Khan, that's not going to change.
Who would your MVP this year for the Steelers? Who would you say? Like the most valuable to the team?
Yeah, I mean, you could make an argument TJ Watt because they were so bad without him. But I mean, if you want to talk about a guy who played most of the season, he made all pro again. I would say Minkah Fitzpatrick. I mean, this guy's since coming over from the Dolphins in 4 years with the Steelers, he's made 3 first team all pros, playmaking safety. I mean, we talked about that opener against the Bengals at the top. Basically put the Steelers on his back and won that game for them himself. So he's that type of a player. So in a down year where the offense was bad and the defense kind of had to carry the load, I would go with Minkah. But again, if you're going to go by the very definition of most valuable, TJ Watt. I mean, that guy, they were 1-8, 1-7 without him, something crazy like that. Their sack numbers dip without him. That's why a guy like Bud Dupree or maybe a draft pick, an outside linebacker who can come in and just be a good backup in case they hit injuries again. That's something the Steelers very much need to address here this offseason.
Yeah, Watt, definitely most valuable player. Hard to give that designation with 7 games missed this year, but you mentioned Minkah Fitzpatrick, 6 interceptions for the Steelers this year was, definitely an asset for a team that is not good in pass protection and pass rushing in general. So he definitely helped and gave the Steelers a lot of assets on defense, especially on that side of defense. So what about your most standout player? I mean, for me, it would be George Pickens. I think people did not expect him to have as good of a year as he did. 801 yards, 4 TDs, 52 receptions. No one expected him to have the season that he did, both locally and nationally. Would it be Pickens for you? Would be the most standout or most improved player, if you want to call it that?
Yeah, I think even if you want to project that forward into who might be a breakout player in 2023, George Pickens is a number 1 receiver in waiting. Deontay Johnson, he's the veteran on this team. He's been that guy here before. But I could see this season those roles almost reversing. I could see George Pickens, you mentioned 800 and some yards as a rookie. I could see that going up well over 1,000. I could see his touchdowns, maybe doubling this year. You think about what he did as a rookie. He was putting up those numbers even without a great knowledge of the entire route tree for the Steelers. And he was doing that with, you know, very much a conservative offense approach. So, yeah, I mean, I think George Pickens is their most talented player on offense. And I think 2023, if things sync up right with the quarterback, if the offensive line continues to progress, it should be a big year for George Pickens.
Yeah, he's probably one of my most exciting players to see next year, just from a progression standpoint, like you were just saying. Let me ask you this though, kind of an interesting question. Was there any rumblings at all towards the end of the season, or especially now as we're in the off season here, of picking up a quarterback for the Pittsburgh? Maybe not to replace Kenny Pickett per se, but just someone that can play under him in case he gets hurt, or maybe a veteran that can help develop Kenny Pickett.
Yeah, I think they are not looking for a starter. I can tell you that much. They think they got their long-term starter. They're going to ride with Kenny Pickett. Right now, Mitch Trubisky is under contract for 2023. If things remain the same, he's got a $10.2 million salary cap hit. He would be the highest paid backup in the NFL. So there is some question, you know, next week, could they ask him to maybe extend his contract, get that cap hit down? Listen, maybe if he refuses, maybe they would cut him. I don't think that's going to happen. But I think if the Steelers had their way, you know, Mitch Trubisky was solid when he had to replace Kenny Pickett a couple of times in the second half of the season. I think they would be more than happy to ride with Mitch Trubisky again as the backup. The one hitch, though, is I think they want to get that cap hit down to where it's a little bit more manageable so they can make a few other moves in free agency if need be.
How old is not Mika Fitzpatrick? Excuse me, the backup. What's his name?
Trubisky.
Thank you.
Trubisky.
Brain fart. How old is he again? Is he?
He was 2018. He was a number 2 overall pick. I want to say he's 27, going on 28. Yeah.
So he still has a lot of time left, and he's not. I thought he might have been older for some reason. I kind of forgot when he was drafted, to be completely honest. It slipped my mind. But yeah, definitely that's tough to be paying a backup that much money would definitely be tough and hit the Steelers really hard when they could use that money for other free agents. But yeah, no, I'm excited for the Steelers next year. I know a lot of people are. It's weird seeing the Steelers struggle as they did this year. I mean, they've been so dominant for the last, you know, how many seasons now and beyond. But yeah, no, it's yeah. You're saying like 10-7. That's your prediction for next year, and making the playoffs at 10-7.
Yeah, absolutely. If you look at, you know, just the last 5 years or so, 2018 they missed the playoffs. 2019 they got back in 20 and 21, and missed again this year. So 3 out of the last 5 years they missed the playoffs. I think this team is built for success in 2023, and as long as they stay healthy, they will be among the contenders in the AFC. I don't think they will be up there with the Chiefs or the Bengals or anything like that, but I fully expect them to be knocking on the door for a playoff berth again.
Yeah, definitely. And do you think that they make it they probably don't think they make it much further than the first round of the playoffs, even if they do make the playoffs, though, right? Just with the roster they have and how good the AFC is, like you were alluding to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you never know what can happen in the playoffs. All you got to do is get in. But listen, if they're 10-7, they're probably going to be what, a 6 or a 7 seed, playing a 2 or a 3 seed. So yeah, I mean, I think anything that they would do beyond the first round would be gravy. And yeah, of course, you know, look to build upon that and see what they can do going forward. But I would say, yeah, if they advance past the first round in 2023, I think they would be very, very happy with that.
Let me ask you this. Is next year a very pivotal season for the Steelers? Because like you said, and you alluded to earlier, a lot of their players are getting older, getting into retirement, or just leaving the team after next year. So if Kenny Pickett doesn't show the progression that they expect him to have this year, and they struggle again, and like I said, a lot of people get older, retire, leave, is it going to get to a point where the Steelers might be selling out a little bit and trying to giving some years to rebuild here, or are they just going to always trying to be a winning franchise?
Yeah, no, their MO is to always try to win. Like I said, they feel like they got their quarterback in Kenny Pickett. Excuse me, but we'll see what happens there. To me, the reason it's a pivotal season, Cam Hayward, their best defensive lineman, he's going to turn 34. Okay. TJ Watt is 28 this year. They haven't won a playoff game since TJ Watt's been in the league, and he's arguably one of the top three defenders in the NFL. So, my point is, how many seasons can go by where you're not taking advantage of this very good defense that you have? So it's time. It's time for them to figure it out on offense. Even though he's only in year 2, it's time for Kenny Pickett to step up and take a little bit more control of this offense. So yeah, they're never going to be in a position where they say they're going to want to rebuild. But in terms of the age of some of their key guys on defense, they got to start taking advantage of their prime years when these guys are still all pros and pro bowlers, and they got to come through and break through in the playoffs one of these years.
Yeah, no fans want to be in that middle zone, right? Where you're not competing for the playoffs, but you're also not bad enough to be getting draft picks. And so that's kind of why I think it's a pivotal season for the Steelers next year, and why I think a lot of weight's on Kenny Pickett and really just the offense to really show up and put some points on the board and get the job done. So it'll be interesting to see. I know there's a lot of Steeler fans out there, both in Pittsburgh and out of Pittsburgh. So a lot of people cheering for him to turn things around next year.
Absolutely. Right, hey guys, thanks for having me on. Let's do it again.
All right, Ray, this has been great. We really appreciate your time. All right, Ray Fittipaldo from the Pittsburgh Post Gazette. Thank you for your time. We'll have you on again soon. Okay.
All right. Thank you, guys.
All right. Thanks, man.